What's up, everybody? Phil Murphy and Laurie Horesh here. It is the Brekkie NFL show for week 2. And Laws, we are showing up to our favorite bagel spot, wherever we get pancakes and bacon. If we might stand in line and queue up for a meat pie. We are half an hour earlier than normal today because we have a Monday night doubleheader, 2 Monday night football games. We have the Bills hosting the Titans, a rematch of a terrific Monday night game from a season ago in Nashville. They're running that back up in Buffalo. And 2 of the more intriguing teams coming out of week 1, teams that you might tip to overtake a longstanding rival atop a division in the Eagles against the Vikings. So we are 30 minutes earlier than normal. We're going to get off air 30 minutes earlier than normal. But other than that, Laws, it is the typical show. It is the people's show. They can chime in, add questions, make comments, make fun of Laurie's affinity for denim, whatever you want to do.
You mentioned this is the people's show, and I actually crowdsourced this yesterday, speaking to a couple of friends, a couple of people who I know watch the show, and I asked them, okay, we've done bomber jackets before, we've done Cowboys Letterman style jackets. What can I offer up? What are we feeling? We're feeling dark denim, light denim. The option was the light blue denim, little Sherpa action up top, and that's what we're going with. I can't stress enough though. You mentioned, grab a bagel, get some food in you. It's the Brekkie NFL show. It's 8:06 in the morning. Get some food into you, because if you could be forgiven yesterday, and I was one of these people for forgetting to have breakfast amid the absolute chaos that was playing out across ESPN 1, ESPN 2, Red Zone, if you're watching through the ESPN app with your credentials. It was absolutely mad out there. The closing, these witching hours, these closing, final 30 minutes of these early slates have been absolutely wild. In saying that, that's what we're going to set the tone with to start off with. There were comebacks. There were 3 off the top, and we'll get into all of them. And everyone, right off the top, we're going to look at Miami and Baltimore. But these frantic comebacks with points exploding in the 4th term, they were Hollywood comebacks, Phil. And that's why, if you cast your eyes down at the lower third, there it is, Hollywood comebacks, setting our tone right off the bat there. So, Phil, you and me were watching, and we've spent far too much time, as parents of, young children, up at all sorts of hours, rewatching old flicks and looking at, people, Hollywood stars that have come and gone into our lives. So what Hollywood comebacks, what superstars that burst onto the scene, faded out, or had a hot start, then disappeared for a little bit, and then made a storming return back? What was playing out for you when we were watching these games yesterday? What Tinseltown, signs up on the hills there? What memories or narratives were coming flooding into your very pop culture educated mind?
See, Laws, and I'm always here for the quantitative, and I do want to support what you're saying. This was a rare day in terms of comebacks. The last time we had 3 second-half comebacks on an NFL single slate of at least 13 points, you got to go back to October of 1992. All of last season, we had 2 such comebacks total. For the year, we had 3 on one day alone in week 2. And we've never had a single day in which 2 teams made a 20-point fourth quarter comeback. Now, the Dolphins and Ravens were the odd man out of that 20-point comeback, but that was a terrific game. Excuse me, they weren't the odd man out because Miami was down 21 in the fourth quarter. They were one of the 2 20-point comebacks. See, good morning, Jets. More impressive, Jets or Laurie's denim jacket? Well, we'll get to the Jets next, but I'm going to go with gangrene on that one. Laws, the Dolphins down 21 in the fourth quarter. The Dolphins started fine, started okay, kept pace with an incendiary Lamar Jackson in the first half. And then, after a little lull, they came storming back. They were box office A-list. To me, that is Matthew McConaughey. The first half, you're doing fine. You're dazed and confused. You're all right, all right, all right. You got some rom-coms in there. You're the heartthrob. And then you kind of fall on the back burner, and you're looking at the Christian Bales and Heath Ledger, rest in peace, of the world, who are overtaking that, handsome, dramatic role. And then here you come with Dallas Buyers Club, True Detective, Interstellar, bang, 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 21-point comeback in the fourth quarter. Tua Tagovailoa goes off, 6 touchdown passes, 469 yards, just the 10th player ever to go over 450 and 6 in any NFL game. He had 4 touchdown passes in the fourth quarter on the road. Last guy to do that, Joe Montana, 1989. More than all right, all right, all right. Mike McDaniel's got those boys believing in Miami. Not inch-perfect deep throws from Tua. maybe fluttered one or two, but you schemed weapons open. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill each get 11 catches, each get 2 touchdowns, each go over 150, each go over 170 receiving yards. That's Matthew McConaughey, baby. That guy is gold. You put him on a soccer pitch for Austin FC, you put him on the sideline for the Texas Longhorns, or you put him in a drama people will watch.
You forgot his contribution to meme culture with the, chest pounding in Wolf of Wall Street as well. That got, Concrete Cowboy, R.M. Williams wearing a blue suit, offering bros across, I know this country, all up and about a couple of years ago. I hear what you're saying there. You're right. And a comeback against an incendiary offense that really took flight early with Lamar Jackson leading the way there. And is it fun to see Rashad Bateman in full form as well? This man is going to be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I'm going to slightly disagree with you here. I agree. You made some very strong points there. I'm going to go with Neil Patrick Harris. I think the Tua revival, the Tua rise, the Finns making a splash with Tua Tagovailoa at the helm. I think it's a Neil Patrick Harris story. Babyface comes on in early stages at Alabama. Boy, did he make an early splash. We're talking the biggest stage of college football, national title games, dying seconds, extra overtime. It's all there laid out for him, and he's dropping left-handed. And maybe I'm a little biased because I am a lefty, but he's dropping left-handed teardrops to a plethora of receivers that make their name in the NFL now, because Alabama has laid the claim to be wide receiver university. Then the shine really comes off during the draft process with questions about the shine starts to come off during the Heisman process, where he goes from a seemingly front runner to fall behind there. Through the draft process, questions about his health, his arm strength, his size. The shine does come off. Then he gets picked in the draft, and he's not a smooth start. We've got the in and the out with veteran quarterbacks like Ryan Fitzpatrick in the mix there in Miami. So it's not smooth. It's come from this babyface rise, Doogie Howser MD, to a bit of not anonymity, but really shine has come off. And then starts to be a little cult revival. Starts on Twitter with the TuaNon folks. There's social media accounts dedicated to it, so go find it. Go see the material they're putting out there. Be absolutely certain. I said TuaNon there, TUA, which would be akin to when Neil Patrick Harris came back into the scenes with the Harold and Kumar cameos. All of a sudden, here he is. Wow,
NPH, baby.
Well, he's back in our life. NPH, baby. I can imagine how many times you've watched Harold and Kumar and the subsequent sequels during your college days, Phil. Nonetheless. So we start to get a little bit of momentum building, and then How I Met Your Mother. You can argue whether the show aged well in the final seasons or not. You might be totally sick and tired of the Barney character. I'm not saying Tua is going to start walking around saying, yeah, that's right, that's Tua, wait for it, licious. We're not going to get some sort of revival of the legendary line that Barney Stinson made absolutely somewhat nauseating in pubs across Australia, and I'm sure it was similar in America. Nonetheless, that's the path that I think Tua has made. He has stormed back on from cult-like fashion to absolute fandom in week 2. Hysteria, euphoria, 6 touchdowns. You mentioned he's got, and we'll touch on the wide receivers a little later in the show. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, both going over $160 in the same game. First time that has happened for a Miami Dolphins duo since Dan Marino was a very
Clayton
very
Duper,
young man.
yeah, the
There you
Marx
go.
Brothers,
Yes.
baby.
In 1986, since Dan Marino was under center,
Young Marino,
Dolphins, but when he was a very, very young man. So I'll go with MPH. I respect your Matthew McConaughey line there. All right. Who are we kicking onto next in this comeback stories from week number 2?
Well, something I do want to mention with that game. If it felt fast, if it felt speedy, it was just to close out Dolphins Ravens. Of the 5 fastest sprint speeds recorded on touchdowns league-wide this season, 4 were in that game. Devin Duvernay, Rashad Bateman, Jalen Waddle. And not to forget, Waddle's touchdown in week 1 is the one outlier of the 4 of the 5. So the 5 fastest sprint speeds recorded on touchdowns league-wide this year are all scored by Ravens or Dolphins. And again, 4 of those in this game. Not the same sprint speeds. Actually, we're going a different angle with our other comeback. The New York Jets, down 13 with less than a minute 55 left. Nick Chubb could have run out the clock. 12 at the 12-yard line, 1st and 10. If he goes down inside the 2, the Browns are kneeling it out. The Jets have no timeouts remaining. But Chubb, helping your fantasy squads, goes into the end zone. No dramas. It's 30-17 pending the extra point. Extra point misses. What happened next, Laws, was something we have not seen in 2,229 NFL games. That is a team down 13 points inside of 2 minutes left, team down that much, coming back to win. Last 2 minutes, Joe Flacco goes 7 for 11 passing, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns, moving the ball more than 10 yards down the field. He was 2 for 3 for both of his touchdowns. The last team to blow such a lead, naturally, 2001, Cleveland Browns. But this is about the good. This is about the old man revival that came out of nowhere. Laz, you pegged this one. This is Mickey Rourke. Tell us why.
I mean, Mickey Rourke rose with the wrestler. We thought, half the people like Mickey Rourke is still acting. How old is Mickey Rourke now? And people say the same thing about
Not as old as he looks.
No.
Take the under.
Look, considering the looks I got at my fantasy draft recently, when half the league realized I was just about to turn 34 and I got some very sideways looks, it's not always nice to look older than you do. It's not as nice as when I was 17 and people thought I was 21. That was a little more advantageous. Nonetheless, let's steer it back here. Mickey Rourke coming out of absolute nowhere. There's questions about how he was to work with. It had been years since this man made a huge splash on the, really grabbed the pulse of the pop culture community. But he comes back with the wrestler with a look. You don't have to be a huge wrestling fan, from the 90s or 80s or whenever, Attitude Era for me, way back when. But you don't have to be a huge fan to gain the emotional or to feel the emotional tension and heartache that performance gave us. And for Joe Flacco, this was every bit the 5-letter word that he threw out there back when he was with the Ravens, ELITE. This was elite. He was dialed in. He had timing with Garrett Wilson, and Jets fans, you want something to be happy about after losing 2 franchise left tackles in 1 month. Here's something to get happy about. Garrett Wilson is an absolute stud. This guy can win at every level of the field. He's showing the timing, the breaks, the smoothness, the playmaking ability at all 3 stages of the route tree that we saw in his college days coming out. We talked about it on the draft show. If you missed it, don't worry. We'll be back in April next year. But a phenomenal comeback, a great little just vintage, Flaccaissance, we'll call it, late in this one, to just remind us of the arm talent that once existed, the knee injuries, the increasing amounts of salt in the salt and pepper offering around here from Mr. Flacco. But look, Jets fans, be happy. For Jets fans, it always feels like they struggle to get through August, forget about September with injuries and key investments and free agent additions, falling down before the first hurdle, before you get to week 1. So this was a lovely come from behind win against a fellow cursed franchise, and a franchise that perhaps some of their fans have earned a couple of sideways looks and some bad juju. We'll touch on that a little later. So welcome back, Joe Flacco, just like we welcomed back Mickey Rourke with the wrestler, 5-7 years ago?
Well, it was longer than that, Laz. It was closer to 15 years ago, and it was actually before that Mickey Rourke kind of reintroduced himself with the role in Sin City when he was 53 years old and looked like he was going on 80. But this is particularly apt because Mickey Rourke was not the original cast lead for the wrestler. It was Nicolas Cage. And after about a month of production, Cage backed out. So Mickey Rourke then steps in. And now we have what seems to be an appropriate nomination, but Brendan Fraser.
Brendan
Fraser,
what?
That's not bad either.
Especially because if you don't know, go watch a movie called School Ties. Brendan Fraser plays a quarterback at a high-end prep school who gets in there. He's got Jewish background. It causes all sorts of it's a period set piece. It's a little it's set back in the day. There's all sorts of tension that comes from that. Brendan Fraser does have background and does have snaps under center. It was a more old school offense they were running in School Ties. A lot of QB power, a lot of running from Fraser. Bit of a power back as well as a quarterback, but he does have that. He does have those reps. He does have that on film. So go watch, see what you think of Fraser on tape. But yeah, someone who certainly rose and then faded. But I love that from 18 football. Welcome.
Pretty good. I would say, you could make the case that Flacco was bedazzled for a little bit in there. And then speaking of bedazzling,
all right.
Speaking of bedazzling, we have one Mr. Kyler Murray leading the comeback of the Cardinals in the desert. Laws, they say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and that is the capital L that the Raiders got. The Cardinals were not taking that with them back down south to Phoenix. Kyler Murray, 2 touchdowns, 2-point conversions in the last 8 minutes and 30 seconds. But why we are pegging this as the comeback that we did. Kyler, the first ever to have a rushing TD, passing TD, rushing 2-point conversion, and a passing 2-point conversion in the same game, and he did it in 8.5 minutes. The one here is Robert Downey Jr. Maybe some off-field, offset issues, some distractions about which we were concerned and lost some faith in Kyler. And then it takes one little Robert Stark in his Iron Man suit zipping around, 86 yards to go 2 on a 2-point conversion, 20 seconds of running with the ball in his hands, 11 defenders, 10 offensive players between him and the goal line, and he zips through it all. That is A-list box office stuff, and that is Robert Downey Jr. now resurrecting the Iron Man, one of the better parts of the Marvel universe, if you ask me. And actually, I should have mentioned Mickey Rourke was an Iron Man too, so it all comes together, Loss.
I love what you've stitched together here. I think you've painted a beautiful Hollywood narrative. I think I want to throw a question, their comment here from one of our viewers. It was thrown in a few minutes ago, so it wasn't directly for this, but I think it sums up quite the temperature that was going on when these two teams from their respective deserts met. What's going on here? Because I think you could definitely appreciate that kind of sentiment. It was, I think, when looking at the comeback, the style of offense that we see Kyler Murray take control of. Yeah, he is pretty much Iron Man at that point. It's improvisational. It's all on him at points, which early in those some of those early Iron Man movies, before the Avengers really took over, there was certainly some thematic comparison there. But look, what I take away from this, I don't come away from this Cardinals performance with glowing love for the steely belief that Cliff Kingsbury's instilled in his team.
Pepper Potts, perhaps.
That offense struggles when it's early in that game, has struggled early in games when they're trying to operate on whatever the scripted game plan is. Generally, teams will have 10 to 15 offensive plays that they're going to go through to start a game. That is not when the Cardinals offense looks most explosive, most potent. I think they flip the script. We're talking Hollywood scripts here. I think you turn it on its head. I think you let Kyler go out. Don't script the opening of that game. Let him go be Kyler. Let the chaos reign. Let the defense start to panic. They're stressed. They don't know what's going on. There's speed to deal with on the back end. And there's a scouting quote out there, and I want to find who said it, but there's a scouting comparison that was making its way around about Kyler Murray and his 2-point conversion where he ran, 86 yards to go 2 yards forward. An amazing bit of vision to go watch. An amazing next-gen stat picturization that has made its way on social media as well. But the comparison, the scouting profile for Kyler Murray that was circulating this morning was he runs like he's just stolen the TV remote from his parents, like a toddler who's stolen the TV remote and is running away from his parents. And it's kind of the way he scampers around with that rapid elusiveness.
Moving.
Yes, a do-it-all performance, a incredible adaptiveness from Murray, who, I think if we're talking Hollywood here, if I'm writing this movie, if I'm writing their offensive game script going forward, flip it. Let him go do full Kyler, go full schoolyard improvisation early. Once they're stressed, then try and bring in some direction, some structure, maybe try and pound the rock if James Conner's healthy or whoever he got running in there behind him, like to Eno Benjamin and such. But yeah, it's very, very chaotic there. It's hard to get any sense of consistency. If you're a fantasy football team drafter who looks to Kyler Murray and he's your man at quarterback, don't worry if he's on 2 points at halftime, because the past 2 weeks, all he's done is come home and deliver massive amounts of production in the second half.
30 burgers.
So that's it. So maybe that's what we need from Arizona going forward. Maybe that's the script. Right. Hollywood, it's been lovely to be with you. We've got a Hollywood segue out of here, Phil, with one more. We do.
This was terrific out of you, Laws. In our pre-show, you were asking aloud, looking at a Hollywood comeback and saying who is an analogous to, and we quickly looked at the scores and the fixtures and the results from yesterday, and it was obvious. It was apparent. With Cobra Kai's resurrection, Karate Kid, Billy Zabka, coming back strong, maybe some character evolution, in fact. That is Jimmy Garoppolo with the San Francisco 49ers. It wasn't a comeback in terms of the 49ers coming from behind in the game, but back like he never left, in the same role, in the same dojo. Here is Jimmy G, not traded, San Francisco. Whew, exhale for that, because whilst you never want to lose a starting quarterback for the season, if we were to rank the 32 teams who could afford that the most, I mean, it's San Francisco up there, it's Atlanta. It is a short list of teams who could move forward with the same momentum having lost their starter. Hat tip to the Cowboys for getting it done with Cooper Rush. We'll talk about how sustainable that might be. But Jimmy G, a guy who has always been solid against pressure, against the blitz. He was terrific in this game, 4 for 4, 51 yards and a touchdown. And I say that because since he's been in San Francisco, he averages almost 11 yards per attempt against the blitz. It's the best in the NFL. So Jimmy G, same dojo, same role. Now he gets the reins, and that now the 49ers' hopes are hitched again to him, as they have been since he came back from his ACL injury.
Him being their, likely hero in 2022, the man to step in, is as likely as the Zabka revival. And look, the comparisons as we transition from Hollywood comebacks to this is fine, ? Is your team in trouble? The lightning quick release and the quick way that Garoppolo operated back at Eastern Illinois compares to those lightning quick reflexes we saw from the prodigious poster boy for karate that was Johnny Lawrence in the early Karate Kid films. We know how the narrative plays out, falls out of favor, certainly becomes the bad guy to some 49ers fans. Yes, Jimmy Garoppolo did become the kind of, pebble in the way, a bit of a progress stopper. Can we kick this over to the uber talented rookie in Trey Lance? No, we'll wait to the sophomore season. So we've got some running narratives there that made this such a lovely way to segue through. Let's flick it over to this is fine. I think it is. We know what this level of talent on the roster can do. They can reach a Super Bowl. They can make a deep playoff push. We'll mention when it comes to Garoppolo at the helm here, yes, the weapons are good. Kittle should be back shortly. Ayuk is certainly in a better place and far out of the doghouse that he was in during much of Jimmy Garoppolo's last season at the helm there under center. Not to mention Deebo Samuel doing the everyman duties that he does in explosive fashion. But the offensive line is not as good as some of the lines that Garoppolo played behind during his time in San Francisco. And I think if we are going to see this 49ers team, lucky as they are to have somehow finagled this situation where Jimmy Garoppolo is there to step in, if they're going to make a deep push, if they're going to take advantage of this situation, it can't be the same Garoppolo-led offense. They need to open up downfield. Ayuk's in a better place. He needs to be utilized more. They need to be stretching the field. This can't be the same iteration what we saw before, because they don't have the cattle, the strength, the power, the consistency up front on the offensive line to deliver that. Not to mention they lost their starting running back, Jeff Wilson, deputizing in workmanlike Jeff Wilson fashion, notwithstanding. But they've lost some talent up front. They've lost some talent in the backfield. This needs to be, and that needs to be the message, that whatever more aggressive elements we may have put into the offense with Trey Lance and his arm power compared to Jimmy Garoppolo, who likes to work shorter in the field, in the middle of the field, we need to keep some of those elements if we're going to take the step that we never did with Jimmy G under center.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the situation. Jimmy G is the known factor. They made it to a Super Bowl with him. If not for an overthrow of, I believe, Emmanuel Sanders, the 49ers win Super Bowl 54 in Miami. If they made it to an NFC title game, in the interim. And with Trey Lance, it was, can that new ability, younger player give us even better. I like it, Obi-Wan. That's good, Dan. That is quite good. See, we should have opened this up to the people before the show. Yes, Disney Plus. Come join, hang out. Star Wars series Andor comes out in the U.S. Day after tomorrow. I'm not sure if it's the same by you. I won't spoil it whenever I see it. 3-episode premiere. But Trey Lance had a high ceiling. And not a high floor, not a low floor, but a moderate floor. We were still figuring that out. Now it's San Francisco knows what they're going to get. But the NFC is, whilst the Niners O-line isn't as good as it once was, nor is the NFC. The NFC is not scary. It's not deep. Dallas doesn't look like it's going to be contending. Green Bay is still trying to figure out its receivers. I don't know what their ceiling ultimately is going to be. Tom Brady certainly looks a year older. The Rams are not without their flaws. I don't know if it would stun us if San Francisco found a way to get to the playoffs, some cold weather games. They keep the ball on the ground like they did last year. Get a road upset. This team's not going to win 14 games, but they need to get to 10 or 11, and then they are an annoying out in the playoffs. So, yeah, for the 49ers, it's fine. This is all going to the dog drinking his coffee with the apartment on fire. Well, Oz, guy who's got that dog in him, the apartment is on fire, as it was, well, since he's been in Cincinnati. Joey B and the Cool Cats, man, they invested in the offseason, the Early Quarterback Development Bureau, our EQBDB. We will have that segment at some point, not too far from now. We gave multiple thumbs up. Collectively, I don't know, 5, 7. We got extra thumbs with all the work they did in the offseason, in free agency, and in the draft to build a wall around Joe Burrow. Well, Oz, through 2 weeks, the Bengals are the first team in NFL history to both lose both games, the first 2 games of the season, on the final play. It had never happened before. They are also the first team ever to be favored by 7 or more in weeks 1 and week 2 and start 0-2. Two unenviable stats that are true about these Bengals. The most unenviable, though, of all, they've allowed 30 pressures this season so far. 15 against the Cowboys, 10 of which were just by Micah Parsons. 15 in week 1, 15 in week 2. The Bengals are 0-7-1 with Burrow as starter when allowing 15 or more pressures. And the deep ball is not there, probably because again, he's not having the time to throw. This is a guy who last season had 19 touchdowns at 10 or more air yards. So far this season, when he's throwing the ball more than 10 yards, no touchdowns, 3 picks. Laz, I don't think this is fine. I'm worried.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of hope that this offense was going to truly be one of the elite tier, top 5 offenses in the league, consistently delivering week in, week out, behind a better offensive line. So far, it's not just Lyle. And have a look down here. We have the are we sure you're still good rankings down here? And Lyle Collins features, I believe, at number 3 on our rankings. You can find that down below on the ticker rolling there. He got made to look like a turnstile by Micah Parsons at some point. Jonah Williams also not taking the step we thought. He finally got a healthy season under him last season and really put some good tape down there. It wasn't dominant, but we thought, okay, we finally got an ascending left tackle again in Cincinnati, trying to still make up for the loss of Andrew Whitworth so many years ago when he departed for the Rams. So we haven't seen the step there from Williams, and Lyle Collins, the early signs are really troubling. So we thought we had 2 pillars there, and now we don't. Then inside, that was never the strongest part of the line. You were hoping that outside in it was going to try and provide, some solid stuff on the outside so you can allow a few more double teams and combo blocks inside to shore that thing up. And yeah, Micah Parsons wreaked havoc, but it was Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Sam Williams made his presence felt. Osoro Digizua threw up the middle, right up the middle, getting penetration. It was across the board, and it is very, very worrying. It is very concerning because if that, on the defensive side, that's not a star-studded defense. We know that is a greater than the sum of its parts, well-coached, cohesive, great communicating unit. But that's really hard to repeat year on year. We know defensive ratings go up and down year to year, really volatile. If they're not going to get that overachievement from the defense and the offense is getting so off schedule, and talk about plans to attack someone, Joe Burrow is so accurate, so smart, so creative. He gets to his reads so quickly. He's precise. But what you do with those precision pocket passes, try and get them off their mark, especially one who underwent ACL surgery and went through a knee reco. Someone like that who is perhaps less willing to throw his body around and create with his legs than a couple of years ago, if you can get them off their spot, you're going to throw the offense off schedule. And that's exactly what Dallas did. Not just the sacks, which there were half a dozen of, but look how much time, look how many snaps he was having to move off where he wanted to plant. Compare that to Tua, who was operating in 2.5 seconds or less, getting back to his drop, seeing a target and firing. Joe Burrow was not in any way afforded that opportunity. So, yeah, I think it is time to worry a little in Cincinnati, not for the long-term future, but for your hopes of repeating or a similar deep playoff push, let alone another Super Bowl run. I think they're in serious trouble right now.
And Laz, it was also schematic. I mean, how many plays have you seen on even just scroll through Twitter today? And you see number 11 for the Cowboys, reigning defensive player of the year. He's got a guy who will contend for defensive player of the year in all likelihood multiple times throughout his career. Micah Parsons, hard to miss, on the line of scrimmage, showing blitz, going completely unacknowledged, and then he does blitz, and it blows up a play. 11 is somebody you need to account for. It wasn't some unsung hero who's blowing these up.
Just a little bit.
So, Laz, we continue on. We're about halfway through the show. Again, if you have any questions, comments, even you're like, what is this? I think we had one of those. This is the Brekkie NFL Show. Welcome in. How do you go from burning it? Oh, so we have a question here from Matt before we continue on to this is fine, ? Matt is asking for a friend. How do you go about burning it down and getting competitive when your team is a dumpster fire waiting for a spark after 2 rounds? So, Laz, who are we? Does Matt support the Colts? Is that what we're going with here?
I mean, this could be fantasy related too.
Fair enough.
But let's expand it across the board. I think look at the core of your team. Is the core of your team still pointing in the right direction? If so, it's not time to burn it down.
Yeah.
If that's your fantasy team, do you feel like you've got a couple of pillars at the running back position, the wide receiver position? Maybe you've got a tight end like Kyle Pitts where the good is going to come, regardless of any commentary from Arthur Smith and what he thinks about fantasy football and whether Kyle Pitts needs to see more targets there in Atlanta. If the core is still strong, you don't overreact, you don't panic, you don't sell everything off for 30 cents on the dollar. Same with your team. If you've run into some tough matchups.
So Matt says dumpster fire. Dumpster fire doesn't suggest strong core. Doesn't suggest Pilates.
There you go. Yes, he's saying dumpster fire. Look, if your NFL team is truly a dumpster fire and it is looking awful, let's throw up. We have another. We have this coming in. Matt Ruley, because Peter Griffin from Brad Bolt. If you're a Carolina Panthers fan, then yes, I think it's time to turn the pessimism and the downtrodden feelings to, well, perhaps a fresh change is coming. Perhaps we'll have a new regime. We'll have new investment. Perhaps we can take some of those pillars or some of our assets, and there is a chance to rebuild. But yeah, look, after 2 weeks, just look at the core. If the core of the roster is still pointing in a solid direction, then have faith that results will turn around. But if it looks like it's rotten from the core or rotten from the top down, whichever way you like to go with that analogy, then yeah, it might be time to just start planning for the future, selling off some assets, and see if you can find some folks to just support in their individual efforts across the season.
Yeah, Laz, let's go to the Panthers with this is fine. They're a team that first ever to allow a 55-plus yard field goal in back-to-back weeks in the fourth quarter or overtime. Cade York was kicking bombs in his first ever NFL game to sink them in week 1, and then in week 2 they fall to a Giants team. The bright side for the Panthers, they've only allowed 3 touchdowns through 2 weeks. The downside is when their offense is on the field, it's not doing much. Baker Mayfield was 6 for 17 against the standard pass rush against the Giants. Not exactly a feared defense. 35% is a career low for Baker. The one bit of silver lining, Christian McCaffrey looked terrific, particularly after contact. He had 76 rush yards after contact of his 102. That's the most for any Panther since The Daily Show, Jonathan Stewart, back in 2009. Sure, if McCaffrey stays fit, they'll win some games, but looking at the Panthers' schedule, if they were a team that was going to contend for a playoff spot, they had to win one of these two. I don't rate their chances against the Bucs or the Saints. To me, they seem like firmly the third best team in a not overwhelming NFC South, but the third best team nonetheless. I don't think it's fine. I think the ceiling is that purgatory of a 7-10, 8-9 record, and a couple more losses like this. Matt Rule can go on vacation in Rhode Island with Peter Griffin and company. So I don't think it's fine in Charlotte.
No, I don't. And I think this is heading a certain way that a lot of people predicted going into the season. I don't think we've seen anything from coaching down, from usage down, the Baker Mayfield Band-Aid over, a severe wound isn't, and he hasn't been terrible or anything like that, but it is not, providing that catalytic change that Panthers fans are so desperate for. Now, I think we've got one more team left when it comes to this is fine. And it is a 2-0 team. It is a team that I'm saying, really? One of the few undefeated teams still.
Undefeated? Underwhelming.
undefeated and underwhelming. So, Phil, that would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And a game against the New Orleans Saints. It looked once again, we're deep in the fourth quarter. It's still 3 apiece. Once again, the Saints defensive scheme is giving Brady. Yes, Mike Evans got ejected during this game and he's without. Chris Godwin and the Julio Jones revival tour had the week off with an ailment. Surprise, surprise. Hate to see it after flashing so nicely in week 1. He's without weapons, but that defensive scheme is giving that Buccaneers offense nightmares once again. You can't go past the referees in this one. And I know I am never one shy away from talking about some suspect calls from the folks wearing the Foot Locker uniforms. But there were 2 calls back-to-back, same drive. One on 4th and 2, 4th and short, 4th and 2. One on 3rd and 8. Ghost penalties, really like non-existent penalties. Harsh calls against the Saints defense that gave Brady and that offense, kept that drive going. Surprise, surprise, what do we know when you have Brady pinned down, you have a Brady offense, doesn't matter whether he's playing in Tampa Bay red or New England Patriots navy blue. When you let the foot off the throat of Tom Brady in that offense, he's going to hurt you. A couple plays later, bang, Brashad Perriman down the sideline, teardrop. That gets them ahead, a lead that they'd never relinquish. But I think that Buccaneers defense that Buccaneers win, that doesn't eventuate, especially not by more than a score. Without some very fortuitous calls there. This was underwhelming. It was feisty. There were fisticuffs. Mike Evans getting thrown out for another shot on Marshawn Lattimore. We've seen, you saw Adrian Peterson, Le'Veon Bell boxing the other week. I have no doubt that when Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans are out of the league, that those two are going to square off in the ring because
Marshawn Lynch, guest referee, would be terrific.
Well, there you go. That's why I've got Marshawn on the mind. And it's always great to have Marshawn Lynch on the mind. But this was a messy performance. It was underwhelming. Jameis Winston playing with suspected four fractured vertebrae.
Yeah, you only have so many.
Yeah, I mean, one fractured vertebrae is not good to be playing football with. 4 is worse. And I'm no doctor, but yeah, I don't come away from this performance. I think the defense is doing a good job there in Tampa Bay. Yeah. That the middle of that defense is particularly nasty. The defensive front, running up the spine of that defense to the linebackers to the safety level. Love the strength that they have there, but man, this offense is super, super underwhelming. That's the word. And I don't come out of this game feeling any more confident that the Brady Buccaneers with the funny offseason for Tom Brady are going a long distance. And I will say a fascinating matchup coming up that you will catch on ESPN will be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the horizon. They've got the Green Bay Packers, a couple of graybeards with underwhelming offenses. We're going to see which one of these former MVPs and which one of these quarterbacks that are undoubtedly on the Mount Rushmore and pantheon of quarterback greatness, Rodgers or Brady, is going to get this ship firing with some level of prolific offense.
Yeah, the dirty dozen, number 12 versus number 12. But Laz, that's a story for me. The Bucs capitalized on injured or quarterbacks lacking fitness. Dak Prescott leaves the game, busted finger in week 1. The Bucs win 19-3 and a forgettable game. Then Jameis Winston with 4 fractured vertebrae. He's 0 for 7 throwing the ball more than 15 yards downfield. No touchdowns. Obviously, he didn't complete a pass, but he completed 2 to the other team. He had 2 picks on such throws. So no threat of vertical of anything. That is not the case not just next week, but then they play the Chiefs the week thereafter. And I think if you're a Bucs supporter, you're looking at weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, Cowboys, Saints, Packers, Chiefs. You're thinking we have to get the first 2 because the next 2 aren't guaranteed. So while underwhelming, it's job done. Job done, move forward, but not without concern. And I'd rather a team have lessons to learn and adjustments to make after a win than a loss, because in a 17-game season, losses are so costly. Brad says, is Mike Evans Chuck Norris? I've seen him slam a revolving door, so perhaps.
I think that's a nice way to segue while we talk about Buccaneers slamming things. Straight into Champed. And we really run the gamut from serious to hilarious to petulant this week in our weekly look around NFL and who deserves a good...
Where do you want to start, Laz? What tone?
Well, let's start with Buccaneers slamming things. Tom Brady,
yeah.
Leave the Microsoft Surface alone. Like, what's going on here? You're violent aggression towards this piece of technology. Once again, frustrated touchdown Tampa Bay, hurling electronics around, like they're going out of business, or a 70% off sale, which electronic stores are often on a 70% off sale. But this was just wildness. Come on, Tommy. We can't keep having pundits across the NFL defending you, saying, "Oh, that's just fiery leadership," when you're taking out on these poor defenseless pieces of communique. So start there with Tommy. Let's just simmer down a little with the electronics thing. And we've got kids watching. I had Charlie watching football yesterday, tuning in, and he's seeing big number 12 in Tampa Bay, throwing his toys around. How am I supposed to tell my young toddler son that
Charlie's been slamming things well before that, Laws? Come on.
Yeah, well, that might have something to do with the way his father carries on watching the Cowboys play. But regardless, that's where we start. Simmer down.
And to follow up with that, what is up with the price points of electronic shops and ornate rug establishments? They always seem to have a 70% off or going out of business sale. I think we have something to say there
Mediterranean
about
and Middle Eastern rug shops. Always
price points. Along that same vein, when people are paying their hard-earned money for things, they reserve the right, to a degree, to voice displeasure. And that has happened in Chicago. It's been a frustrating stretch for the Bears for, the better part of 4 decades. It's been brief, very rare exceptions. Justin Fields was the hope. They spent a top 11 pick on this guy, or 11th overall pick on him. Then he goes 7 for 11 passing for 70 yards, 30 of which was his first throw of the game. So he goes 6 for 10 for 40 yards thereafter. Completely underutilized. Fields, I believe it was post-game. If not, it was the next day, today. Fields was asked about the fans' displeasure. And I'm going to read the quote and clarify, while the sentiment is right, it was perhaps the most inelegant way to say it. And I'll just read the quote. Fields said, quote, "It hurts more in the locker room than with Bears fans. At the end of the day, they're not putting in any work." The first sentence was fine. The second one starts to take investment away from people who have invested a lot of their time, talent, treasure in this franchise from before not only Fields was with the franchise, but from before he was born. And that line there, reserve that for sports radio. The shock jock radio who's going to say, "You fans don't know," whatever. As the quarterback, you are the front-facing CEO of the team. So that quote could have been, "It hurts more in the locker room than with Bears fans." Exactly what he said. At the end of the day, all we can do is put in work to get better. Or at the end of the day, I promise we're gonna put in the work necessary to get better, period. When he starts to point the finger back as he did, again, some critics will say, his sentiment is right. He's putting in the work, whatever. To do anything to make it combative with a franchise that's been beyond loyal, far more than they deserve. They're paying $63 million US to players who aren't on the roster this season because prior to Poles getting there, their new GM, they've been completely mismanaged. Yet people are still coming to Soldier Field, an ancient field. They're going to be getting a new stadium, it looks like, in Arlington Heights, 30 kilometers up the road, and a beautiful facility. But until that time, not the most convenient place to get to. It's cold. It's nasty. It's the northern winter is coming. And to me, that was just a little cold from Fields himself. And he's earned the ire of Bears supporters. You need to be better, champ.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's an overstep. I think it's frustration speaking. I think a young quarterback who just for a moment there, you hear the outward noise and instead of saying something like, "We are putting in work," I hear fans are frustrated, but we are in these rooms sweating and toiling. You kind of create that friction point and that, a bit of a dichotomy between, the guys in the locker room and those in the stands, which, look, I'm a big fan of Justin Fields. I hate the situation he's being put in. It's frustrating to watch a team that has so few offensive weapons. A guy like Darnell Mooney get blanketed all night when Justin Fields would love to be dialing up some deep route concepts and just knowing that, consider the Packers and the defensive scheme that exists in there. We can trace this back to kind of the Staley Fangio influences with what they're running there with the Packers. That they've got deep lying safeties, bracketing, passing off, and really honing in on those deep plays. And I can only imagine the frustration coursing through that offense when there was that one deep shot to Darnell Mooney yesterday, and Eric Stokes, who is an absolute blazer, 4.3 speed and a phenomenal young corner. That corner duo in general, Jair Alexander closed it out with a pick, and Eric Stokes, a fantastic duo. But him not even going stride for stride with Mooney, but even outpacing a guy as fast as Darnell Mooney downfield. There was so much frustration just in that play. You just know how constrained and trapped they are conceptually and talent-wise where the offense is right now. They're not the run game looks good because, again, that's the scheme you're up against. They're going to be a little light up front. You're going to be able to get some running stuff going. But in a contest against Aaron Rodgers, when he's really starting to feel the rhythm, saw some better chemistry with some of those young wide receivers. You see the running, Aaron Jones looking phenomenal. A.J. Dillon, just an absolute hammer there in the backfield. It's not enough. You can sense it. It was spirited early, but it's not enough. But that frustration, the worst thing, well, not the worst thing, but one of the worst things you can do from a PR and a rep and an energy standpoint is start to shine that back on the fans who, as you said, have been about as loyal as they come.
Well, Oz, there are worse things we can do as we continue on with Champ. We have about 15 minutes left in the show, 25 minutes until kickoff in Buffalo between the Titans and the Bills. Laz, do you want to close out or would you rather I?
I want to just take a moment. We're talking about fans, and right then we were being sympathetic towards fan behavior. This one is not. I'm going to turn critical here. What on earth are you doing laying hands on a quarterback who steps close towards the barrier there? Some of the great scenes in football are, scenes of jubilation, scenes of contrast between players celebrating or players falling short and either the shared emotion or the contrasting emotion we see from the sidelines. But the fan, and it's going to be a storyline to watch the story. You go check espn.com.au for the updates. But a fan seemingly slapping Kyler Murray, can't confirm whether that is a Vegas Raiders fan or a general, just someone, an attendant, someone who bought a ticket and is visiting at the game, but putting full palm, onto a quarterback's face. I mean, what on earth are we doing here? I know people have not been able to go to games during COVID lockdown, and there's been all sorts of extra fervent spirit in the stands across world sport. But what on earth are you doing? It doesn't look like it was inadvertent. We'll see how it plays out. But this is just exactly what you don't want to see. Just check yourself. Simmer down, champion. This is not how you go to a game and engage. I think of some awesome, fan on play, just, whether it's jawing at each other. I think this was stepping over the line, but wasn't as bad. Jamal Charles, when he had about 1,000 touchdowns in one of the decisive weeks of fantasy football season a few years back against the then Oakland Raiders. He heads towards the end zone and there's Raiders fans throwing beer, and it even showers him a little bit. But just these photos and these shots of someone celebrating. Look, again, shouldn't be pouring beer on someone. I don't know how advertent it was. That was one step, but then to actually go up and lay hands on a player. I mean, what on earth are you doing? A big time simmer down, champion, and check yourself.
Yeah, Laz, I'm going to close it out with something that obvious platitude, but apparently not, because there are scores of photos and fans attending Browns home games who have made punchlines out of the Deshaun Watson sexual assault, the litany of allegations against Watson, for which he's been suspended for 11 games and fined a substantial amount. The New York Times reporting on it is jarring. It's disgusting. Some of the things that he's been accused of doing by a number of alleged victims, and trying to navigate this. At best, Deshaun Watson has an unhealthy addiction to massages. At worst, the New York Times reporting is true. And it seems the findings of the NFL on that spectrum lean toward the latter. Yet, I understand Browns supporters going to games, cheering for the home team. Hell, I understand the partisanship of a Brown supporter when number 4 comes out of the tunnel hoping he throws a touchdown. I'm not going to get up on my soapbox and say, they should wish ill of Deshaun Watson in being able to separate, hey, I hope he wins a football game, but what he did was abhorrent. That's fine. But what's going on now is many in Cleveland have turned that situation into a punchline. You see the number 4 jerseys with custom things on the back, referencing sexual acts, and mannequins who are draped and in the parking lot and postured sexually, and they're cheap sophomore, looking for a cheap sophomorish laugh. Again, it's a platitude because anybody with any semblance of sense would say that it is inappropriate, it is grotesque. Yet still, there are people who think that it's an appropriate thing, and it's why that culture, to me, kind of perpetuates, because people make light of it, and whether they do so because it's their way of dealing with a measure of discomfort with the situation to try and turn it into a joke, or if it's a situation in which they don't agree with the NFL's punishment and they're unable to separate and see the world through anything other than orange-colored lenses. Either way, I think to the vast majority of us, it is an awful way to approach the situation. I'm not going to paint too broad of a brush. It is not the majority of Browns fans. It is a steep minority of them. But to those beyond a Simmer Down champion, just be better human beings.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what you laid out there. And it's, as a forget working in sports media for a second, as a sports fan, it's always conflicting when a player on your team, on the team you support, commits or is alleged to have committed a certain crime or act, or your team acquires a player who has that back history, backstory, who has that kind of that troubling past. It could be really conflicting. It can be really, people can start to rationalize. People can start to try and challenge perhaps what they usually go with, their usual sense of virtues. Beliefs can be really, really confronted. But what we're seeing there in these, in the parking lot and before game and during game and on jerseys from Browns, not all Browns fans, I don't want to cast every Browns fan in that light. That's not fair. But what we're seeing with some Browns fans is honestly very distasteful. It is, it's very disturbing, and it's something that casts a nasty light and a nasty dark cloud over the football season, and we know that's only going to build, and it's probably going to come to the fore even more when we get towards his return, ironically enough, against the Houston Texans. But I couldn't agree more with that idea that just Browns fans, seriously, so these Browns fans, not the ones that have either stepped away from the team or are just standing, supporting, in their colors, understanding the gravity of the situation going on with Deshaun Watson, but these particular Browns fans, be better people. Couldn't agree with that more. That is champ for today, Phil. Now we move on to a different kind of champs. Now we move on to the NFL Tag Team Champions of the world. Now, last week you gave us a phenomenal rendition of the New Age Outlaws intro, championed by the Road Dogg, Jesse James, and accompanied by Badass Billy Gunn. Today, feels a bit weird to go into exactly that persona off the back of what we just talked about, but I have brought something for the Tag Team Champions. Right here. No, this isn't a tag team title. This is for those that know.
It's certainly not a propaganda title. I can tell you that much.
No, that is a Stone Cold Steve Austin smoking skull belt from the Attitude Era that you can catch right there. But I'll bring this out when we get to Tag Team Champions. Last week, it was the Brains Trust in Minnesota combined with Justin Jefferson and their prolific start to the season. Phil, who is taking? The Vikings haven't really been able that duo hasn't been able to stake their claim. They're coming up shortly as we get close to rounding out this show. But who is taking the title in week 2? Who has wrestled the gold away? Who stood out as the dynamic duo across the NFL?
Well, last week we talked about Coach O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and Wes Phillips. They kind of made up the modern D-Generation X. This tag team, they do kind of the same thing. They're both flyers. They're almost indistinguishable to the uneducated eye. They're the modern Hardy Boys. Dan and Matt, they are Tyreek and Jalen, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, combining for 22 catches, 364 yards, and 4 touchdowns in a single game. That's on 32 targets. They're averaging 10.7 yards per target this season. They average better than 11 per attempt in beating the Ravens. Tua Tagovailoa throwing 4 fourth-quarter touchdowns, 2 of which went to Tyreek Hill, targeted him 5 times in the fourth quarter, had 5 catches, 142 yards. This was like a squash match in terms of them just snatching the belt away. Your new tag team champions, the Hardy Boys reimagined, Hill and Waddle.
I love that you went to the Hardy Boys. That we didn't even talk about this before the show, but that's where my mind went to, because these two players, and we kind of have seen it from Tyreek Hill in previous years, but now we're seeing it from Jalen Waddle as well. These aren't the biggest bodies. This isn't Chris Godwin and Mike Evans as a duo, but they play above the rim. They will go up and get it, and they'll play above the build, height, and weight, which certainly plays into what we saw from Team Extreme, the Hardy Boys back in the day. Those TLC matches were something absolutely ferocious. So, yeah, I think the Hardy Boys have returned here. I think you start.
I need wrist tape.
You can feel you need you need wrist. You need those funny armbands that Jeff wore that had like the rave armbands that had the circles cut into them. Maybe some rave. There you go. Some rave boots as well. But yeah, it's time to high step. So you can feel that familiar beat bursting out of the speakers. We mentioned it's been since the 80s since we saw a double act like this in the same game from wide receiver duo in Miami. And I just think the fit is so potent there. What they're asking Tua to do, I mentioned it earlier in the show, not these big, long holding, hold the ball after a 7-step drop in the pocket. Wait. It is 5 steps. It's quick stuff. Get to your spot. He's firing on time. And these receivers are providing space. They're providing explosive yak ability, and Tua is fitting that. They fit into a clear and obvious philosophy of speed that Mike McDaniel has flourishing down there in Dolphins country. And they are the most exciting team to watch right now. I'm thoroughly enjoying watching Patrick Mahomes play for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think we get treated to more Josh Allen football. We get the Minnesota Vikings, the highlight reel Vikings up. We got a double. It's not even a double header today, Phil. It's double parked. We got both games going at the same time.
Right?
One starts before the other. We kick off at 9:50. We kick off at 9:15, and then we go again a bit after 10 o'clock. There, ESPN 1, ESPN 2. It's double parked. Drink in both hands. It's early in the morning, so a coffee in both hands. But still, this is a fantastic time to be watching NFL football. But for me, the Dolphins are the most exciting team to watch right now. They're not alone in the state of Florida. Some good
football next week
coming out of the state of Florida.
Next week.
Mm-hmm.
Dolphins hosting the Bills. So you want the litmus test, you want the touchstone to see where you stand. Mike McDaniel and that offense, you're putting your belt on the line against who? Against the natural disasters, earthquake and whatever, tsunami, whatever they were. I mean, it's Hawk and Animal.
The Legion of Doom. Yeah, the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors.
There we go.
What a rush.
So Josh Allen will have spikes on his shoulder pads for that game. Laz, we got to get the propaganda. You will hope that Josh Allen has spikes on his shoulder pads today against the Titans. Before we start, just a little update on our season standings. Let people know who might have missed last week where we stand. We had a good week collectively. Laz and I offered 4 tips for the Monday Night Football, Tuesday midday, of course, in Australia. Broncos falling somehow to the Seahawks. We went 3-1 collectively, but 2-0 on this side of the pond. 1-1 over there. Maybe a late held ball in Melbourne. Who knows? Went south. Delay of game, perhaps. Geno Smith did not get his interception. So Team Phil is up 1.85 units as we head to week 2. Laz in golf, you got the lower score. So you go first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. I'll talk to you about the kind of rules and etiquette of golf at another time, Phil. All right, you mentioned Josh Allen with spikes on. I love Josh Allen over 39.5 rush yards. He's hit that mark, including the playoffs, in 8 of his last 10 games. He's gone past that. One of the 2 times he didn't, he hit 39 on the number, so he's been close there as well. We'll call it 8.5 times out of the last 10 that he's hit it. And I think when you look at what Tennessee can actually do, yeah, they've had some injuries in the pass rush there, but they were still able to affect the pocket in week 1. I think they're able to get some push and move him off his spot. But when you move Josh Allen off his spot, he starts to get a little itchy to break free. He starts to get that feeling in his legs that it's time for the bulldozer. Bulldozer doesn't even make it. It's not even fair because he's so much faster than a bulldozer.
He's like an SUV.
Yeah. SUV, sure. Or just a straight up moose. Like, the man is a thunderous athlete on the move, and I think he gets presented that opportunity by being moved around a little with some pressure in the pocket, and he takes advantage against an overmatched defense, I think, this week. So, yeah, give me over 39.5 yards for Josh Allen as my first one. You're getting that at about the usual mark at about $1.88.
People. Don't invest your hard-earned lobsters and blueberries and pineapples in that tip. Josh Allen, four career games against the Titans. He's never even eclipsed 30 rush yards. That includes an up-and-down game a season ago. It includes when Josh Allen couldn't hit 60% of his passes to save his life. So, Laz, I'm not going that way. But I do think old Josh, in a mild evening in Buffalo, all things considered, will continue to find his favored target, Stephon Diggs. There's the over-under for his receiving yards, and we do recommend you shop around. 75, 77 receiving yards. I did find an alternate receiving for him to go over 80 yards at $2.16. Last week, Diggs on 9 targets caught 8 balls for 122 yards and a touchdown. Gabe Davis hurt an ankle, sprained his ankle, rolled his ankle in a walkthrough Saturday. He's listed as questionable, but Ian Rappaport has said that is a very optimistic questionable. If Davis plays, he'll be severely limited. So I think Stephon Diggs has a big day. The Bills are so prolific that it's not like the Bears where you can just bracket Mooney. The Titans will have to respect other options, but it's just one less reliable target to whom Allen can target. So Stephon Diggs, plus money, $2.16. That's where you put your lobsters and your pineapples, Laz.
I mean, look, we're a tag team here, so I'm not gonna bury your pick. Actually, like the rationale behind it. But let's move on because we've hit the hour mark here. So let's try and get out of here at 60 seconds. My next one, I'm not gonna go broke betting against Justin Jefferson this year. Over 7.5 receptions. You're getting that at 221 right now. That is the outsider on that line. Over 7.5 receptions. I think there's not an Eagles DB. One, the Eagles will need to deal with multiple receiving threats. It's not just locking down on one target. And 2, I don't think there's. Even with the added investment in the secondary, I don't think there's a defensive back or corner that can sufficiently hone in on Justin Jefferson, especially the way that they're scheming him open. It's not just him manned up against corners or even DBs. He's getting moved around, and defenses are finding themselves in trouble up against linebackers lined up with Justin Jefferson in coverage, which is never going to end well. So he can beat you in every different way. He can beat you short. He can beat you in the intermediate. He can take you deep. And not to mention that it's man coverage, it's zone coverage. He's adept at all of it. Inside, outside. It's time to ride with Justin Jefferson over 7.5 receptions. Take it to the bank, 221. And that after that hits, then I'll have retaken the lead here or taken the lead in our little propaganda duel.
I got nothing bad to say about it, Laz. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown have a terrific game against the Eagles. He was our honorable mention. He and Jared Goff were our honorable mention tag team champions. We just got late early here on the Brekkie NFL show. Best market I saw for that here stateside was $2 so $2.21 is a terrific number. Jump on that before it dips back down. My tip for Eagles at home against the Vikings, thank you, Stu, is Jalen Hurts, under 237.5 passing yards at $1.91. That's the over-under here. This seems like the money is a little bit on the over, which I don't get. As great as his game was, great against the Lions, very reliant on A.J. Brown. He threw for 243, so he didn't exactly soar over that total. He's got a taller task in terms of a team that's really focused on its secondary in recent years in the Vikings. And Hurts' numbers were padded by odd success on long situations with more than 10 yards to go. He went 8 for 12 for 101 yards, including 5 first downs. I think the Vikings do a better job of limiting that. I don't think they limit him to the degree that they did Aaron Rodgers, but we did see in week 1 this Minnesota defense can be capable. 237 feels too high for me. Just like last week when I went under 208 on Geno Smith and that hit, under 237.5 at $1.91. And if you've been watching the pregame on ESPN, Lisa Salters, the wind is blowing around 20 kilometer per hour winds. Lisa Salters showing us the weather report there that it may not be the most conducive conditions to throwing the ball. Laz liked that pick so much, he just said goodbye. He peaced out. So I guess it's time for us to say goodbye. Got to pick my side. That's been it for the Brekkie NFL show. Thank you for bearing with us. This is what happens when we make a live internet television. But you tune in, ESPN and ESPN2, the double parked. I like that better than double header of Monday night, Tuesday midday games, of course, from Buffalo and Philadelphia. I'm Phil Murphy. I'm going to hit the X on my screen. I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to find out together, but we will see you next week. I'll actually be in New York for Giants Cowboys, which should be another fun one. A little bit of intrigue there as well. So thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.